Good morning. I'm David Barsamian. Welcome to a special program on Iran. No doubt wanting to build on its enormous successes and progress, those are the words of Dick Cheney, in Iraq and Afghanistan, the Bush administration is now threatening Iran with war. For the propaganda masters, it's a dream. All they have to do is change the Q in Iraq to an N, and they are good to go. They can recycle the same scripts, talking points, and propaganda. Ahmadinejad is the new Hitler, or Saddam, or bin Laden, or maybe all three combined. Iran is a growing threat, the vice president warns us. Condoleezza Rice calls the country the central bank of global terror. CNN's Glenn Beck says Iran is a global threat as big as we've seen since the Nazis. To talk about Iran this morning is Mohammad Mahallati. He is a graduate of McGill University. He served as Iran's ambassador to the United Nations in the late 1980s. Welcome to the program.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here.
Well, Iran is certainly in the gun sights of the Bush administration. I was in the country in February. You were there just a few months before that. People were asking me, is America going to attack Iran? What do you see as the likelihood of that happening?
Well, as a peacemaker that I consider myself to be, or I've tried to be, this is against my hope. I hope that this is not the reality. Specifically given the historic fact that in the last, let's say, 200 years, Iran has never tried to have any kind of military venture against its neighbor. It is a well-established fact that Iran, therefore, in the last 2 centuries has been a peaceful country. And in the last a few decades has been actually a victim of many wars against it, specifically by Saddam Hussein. What is the likelihood? I hope that there would not be any war. At least the Iranian psyche is not ready for war. I am not defending Iranian regime, but what I can say is that Iranians, among all Muslim nations, are on the top of those who love American culture and American people. And therefore, there is really no ground to launch a war against Iran. Now, the excuse probably is the question of nuclear endeavors on the part of Iran. However, to better understand why Iran is so keen to develop a nuclear power plant, I think we should look at the history of Iran in the last 3 decades, and to see that Iran has felt so much isolated since Islamic Revolution, and therefore has tried to sustain its own economic sources and try to be not dependent to other countries who, for one reason or another, may boycott it. Therefore, they are trying to, given the energy crisis in the world, try to develop a nuclear power plant, and at least, as they say officially, not to fall behind from the technology of nuclear scientific research.
But the United States in the 1970s, during the Ford administration and later under Carter and Secretary of State Kissinger under Ford, actively encouraged the Shah of Iran to develop nuclear technology. The U.S. was making that available. And at that time, I remember distinctly the Ford and Carter line was that oil doesn't last forever, and that countries should have alternative sources of energy. That argument is being used against Tehran today.
Exactly. The point is that, and I think the Iranian officials have reminded the world, and indirectly American officials, of that history. On the other side, when we look at the history of the past 20-something years, Iran has been victim of a war, and where Iran found itself against almost all foreign powers, in addition to, of course, the forces of Saddam Hussein. So the feeling of isolation, I think, will create more aggressive policies on the part of Iran, and therefore probably a better policy would be to engage Iran and talk to Iran. I think at least this is what I have been hearing from all kind of specialists in this conference who have been talking about Iran and the situation in the region and so forth.
In September 1980, the war you were referring to was launched by Saddam Hussein against Iran, munificently supported by the United States, Great Britain, Germany, the Soviet Union, and France, and other countries. Iran was virtually isolated during that war. I noticed in your biography that you served as Iran's UN ambassador to the United Nations. How did that appointment come about?
Well, I was very much engaged in Iranian Foreign Ministry during 80s, basically trying to contain war, if not finish the war, because the problem was that Security Council was unfortunately very much biased in favor of Iraq, and therefore were adopting resolutions one after another one with a language which was negative against Iran and somehow indirectly a positive in favor of Saddam Hussein, and encouraging Saddam to continue war. So my mission in my official capacity, or my even personal conviction, was that if we cannot finish the war, at least we have to contain the war. We have to remember that it was an all-out war. It was a total war in which lots of weapons of mass destruction were used. Chemical weapons was quite fashionable in the hand of Saddam Hussein. And one of Iranians' agonies has been that in those years, no matter how much Iran was trying to bring international attention to the fact that Saddam Hussein is using chemical weapons, nobody paid attention. And now, of course, Iranians cannot understand the double language, double standard, that if you are so keen, so sensitive against weapons of mass destruction, where was this sensitivity during those years that Saddam Hussein was using chemical weapons? So I think what is awkward on the part of Iranian public opinion is this double standard, I think.
Were you an active supporter of Ayatollah Imam Khomeini's Islamic Revolution?
I was in support of what people wanted. I was not in support of one specific person. I never believed that one person is correct in all aspects of his thought, and therefore, followed the public opinion and public aspiration. That was my mission. And basically, I took upon myself to bring peace as soon as possible.
You grew up during the period of the reign of the Shah. What was your assessment of his rule from 1953, when he was put on the peacock throne by a coup d'etat staged by the United States, until his overthrow in 1979, 26 years ruling Iran?
Well, again, as usual, I don't have any black and white vision of systems, institutions, or countries. And as such, the previous regime also had some positive, let's say, features and achievements. Its foreign policy, for example, wasn't bad at all. Regional foreign policy of the Shah's regime. There was some progress in the country. However, the major problem was that as much as he claimed to be pushing country towards progress, he did not let enough political participation on the part of the people, and therefore it became a tyrannic regime that was based on the decision of one single person. And that was the most important defect of that regime.
And you were aware of SAVAK, the secret police agency of the Shah, and its human rights violations?
Certainly. I personally was victim of, for example, as a very young student, that one police who made an accident with my car could do almost anything to a poor student at that time and felt free to do whatever, and relying on the power of SAVAK or whatever. That was definitely something that people were totally unhappy about.
In 1975, the Shah negotiated a deal with Saddam Hussein of Iraq over the Shatt al-Arab waterway, and also dealing with the whole question of Kurdistan.
Yes.
Can you talk about that?
I think that was a very good deal. I think that's why I mentioned that Shah's foreign policy wasn't bad at all.
Was it good for the Kurds?
The 1975 agreement, I think, was a very good agreement. Serving both Iran and Iraq and bringing some kind of peace, which unfortunately was breached by Saddam Hussein unilaterally.
But that Algiers negotiated agreement, was that beneficial to the Kurds?
I think ultimately it was, because somehow it controlled the situation. The equation of the Kurdish existence in that region is not that simple. It's very complex. We have, of course, Kurds in Iraq, we have Kurds in Turkey, and we have Kurds in Iran. But comparatively speaking, relatively speaking, it brought some kind of stability to the Kurdish situation. But was it perfect? I can never say that.
What's your assessment of the organization that's known as the Mujahideen-e-Khalq?
Anything that is infiltrated by Stalinist manners in their attitude, whatever political orientation they may have, I find myself against. Unfortunately, their attitude and their manners early on in the revolution has been highly affected by the leftist manners, and that was quite harmful for their image and for their history, and therefore I don't give them any chance in the future of Iran.
You don't think they have much support inside the country?
By no means, specifically given that during Iran-Iraq war, they went to Iraq and they supported Saddam Hussein, and they received support from Saddam Hussein. This is not forgivable by Iranian people.
Iran is a multilingual, multi-ethnic society. There are regions of the country such as Baluchistan, Kurdistan, Khuzestan, for example. Baluchistan in the southeast has been the site of several attacks supposedly coming from Pakistan, attacking Iranian border guards, blowing up a bus. When I was there in February, 12 Iranians were killed. Who's behind these attacks?
Well, I was reading a paper saying that one American official referring to it, that they have been behind it. And it is really unfortunate because Iran, to certain perspective, is very much similar to United States. Suppose that somebody does something, provoke one of the states to claim independence from United States. What would be the reaction of the Americans towards, the independence of the state of Colorado from the rest of United States? It does not make any sense. Although Iranian population within it has lots of ethnic backgrounds and people from various ethnicity. However, there is a very strong single cultural mold that holds Iranian people together. In other words, we have Azeris in Iran, but they are Iranian first and Azeri speaking second. There are Baluchis in Iran, but they are Iranian first. And that cultural mode, that kind of cultural solidarity is so strong. And it's not something that I claim as something new, but it has held Iran together for quite a number of thousands of years. And therefore that stays there. In other words, any provocation for any of this provincial secession is not going to work. It's a bad policy, I may say.
90% of the population adheres to Shia Islam. I was in Iran during Muharram, which is the first month of the Islamic calendar, and the Tasura and Ashura. And one of the slogans that people were chanting, and you could see in signs and billboards, Haruz Ashura, Harja Karbala. Can you talk about the influence of Shiaism on Iran?
Certainly. Shiism actually was the official religion of Iran since early 16th century, although it has roots since the beginning of Islam. Shiism starts actually from the time of the Prophet himself. I think Shiism will be a very important and strong feature of Iranian culture for a couple of reasons. Because Shiism is very much, I may say, a humanistic interpretation of Islam. And that fits with Iranian psyche very well. Iranians also, since centuries before Islam, were focusing, emphasizing in their literature, in their moral outlook on justice. And this is another element that Shiism focus on heavily and emphatically. And Shiism is also, in its legal stance, very much reasoned-based. Rationality has a great role in Shi'i jurisprudence, for example. Now, reason or khirad, when we read Ferdowsi, the epic poet Shahnameh, Benam Khudavand Jan Khorad, when he wants to start his great epic literature, he says, in the name of God, of soul and reason. So reason is a very important part of Iranian cosmology, understanding of the world. And therefore, you see that Shiism is exactly, fits in all other walks of life, of Iranian walks of life. Shiism will remain as a feature of Iranian religious outlook for good, I believe.
One striking cultural religious figure in Iran, when you go there, is you see pictures of Imam Ali. And, of course, in Sunni Islam, which is the other branch of the religion, human depictions is considered haram. It's forbidden. It's taboo. Mm-hmm. Why is Imam Ali so important?
Because he is a symbol of justice. Interestingly, Imam Ali did not participate in any conquest wars in outside Arabia, whereas all other caliphs were involved in this. Imam Ali.
So he was Arab, not Iranian.
He was Arab, of course, and not Iranian. But nevertheless, because he was a symbol of justice and known in the Islamic history to be a symbol of justice, and because Iranians have been focusing on the virtue of justice since before Islam. Therefore, these two came together, and Imam Ali became a great epitome of a paragon for Iranian moral system.
And his son Imam Hussein?
And his son Imam Hussein, of course, was martyred. But it's very interesting that when you look at the difference between Shiism and Sunnism, I may say probably the best or the most important feature of the differences is that Sunnism is very much text-based, and Shiism focuses on the role of interpreter. So person, the agent of human being, has as much importance in interpreting Quran. And therefore Ali, not only as a just warrior, but more importantly, as somebody who could provide the best interpretation of Quran became important. And from that, I can say that Shiism is an humanistic interpretation of Islam. And no wonder that when in the entire Islamic world during 10th and 11th century, Shiism became predominant in the Islamic world, Fatimid in the Egypt, and the Buyids in Iran, and Hamdanis, and afterwards and Qarmatis. At that specific stage of history, Islamic humanism developed to an unprecedented scale. And interestingly enough, it was that humanism that helped deliverance of the sources of Renaissance to Europe. So there is a connection there. Islamic interpretation is humanistic Islamic interpretation by Shiites in the Islamic world in 10th, 11th century, which ultimately transferred to Europe as the source of Renaissance.
We just have a few minutes left, unfortunately. Jumping to the present, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad is president of Iran. He was former mayor of Tehran, former Revolutionary Guard. What are your views on him?
He is a populist, as known in Iran. He knows how to speak with the middle class and lower class, and he speaks their language, and that is his source of power, I believe. But whether he is the best choice for Iran, I don't want to make any judgment on that. Probably for foreign policy, somebody like Khatami was by far better, because he was focused on civilizational role of Iran in international relations. That was extremely important.
When I was in Iran, I was talking to someone, and he told me that Ahmadinejad is George Bush's twin, and I asked him to explain what do you mean by that. He said they're both delusional. Bush believes that he's channeling God and acting on behalf of religion, and Ahmadinejad also believes the same.
I am personally against populist policies because I have a non-confrontational perspective, and therefore anything that would add fuel to the fire of confrontation, and I find natural inclination against it. That's all what I can say. If
listeners want to learn more about Iran, can you recommend some maybe websites or magazines or books?
Well, there is a website called Guya, which provides lots of interesting sites in Persian and in English. It is GOOYA.com.
Guya.com.
Guya.com provides, and that's what all Iranian people and scholars go to in order to read day-to-day news.
You teach today at Oberlin College in Ohio.
Yes.
What do you teach there?
Middle Eastern and North African studies. I teach courses on Islam, courses on religion and politics, Islamic ethics, history and theory, and so forth.
I'd like to thank you very much for joining us this morning here on KGNU. Mohammad Mahallati is our guest. Thanks very much. Mutashakkaram.
Thank you very much indeed, and I have to say that Boulder is already my second home, not because it resembles Shiraz, surrounded by beautiful mountains, but also because it contains lots of wonderful, peacemaking, lovely people.
Thanks very much.